All right, so let's do very brief intros. Jason, it's just your first time at this conference. You have never been on my channel. So go ahead and do a brief intro of yourself, and then we'll keep it going.
Sure. My name is Jason Brett. I'm a former U.S. regulator during the financial crisis in 08-09 with the FDIC. So I saw all of the bank crises, and I saw how the public relations aspect of the U.S. government had to kick in to help preserve the banking system back then, as well as looking at things like AIG counterparty risk and the like. And so it really opened my eyes to the discussions that I hear about all the time in Bitcoin today regarding the issues they have with Federal Reserve and their growing balance sheet and inflation. So since then, I do a lot of consulting for folks in the space regarding all kinds of SEC, FinCEN, and now banking matters now that digital assets are being considered for being in the banking system. And it's an honor to be here, Tone. Thanks.
All right, awesome. And Sasha?
Sure, thanks, Tone. Glad to be here. Glad to see everyone again for the third time at this conference. It's one of my favorite conferences. I'm an attorney at HODDER law firm and mostly focus working with Bitcoin-related companies, helping them if they are involved with the exchange of Bitcoin for fiat, getting set up with their anti-money laundering programs or registering with FinCEN and pretty much any other aspect of the crypto industry. I help a lot of different clients. I previously spent the last year working as senior counsel at Exodus Wallet, which is a non-custodial crypto wallet.
All right, so before I go on with questions, let me ask you this. What is the most important regulatory issue for Bitcoin? What direction you want it to go? What direction you think it will go? So, ladies first, Sasha.
Sure. Thanks, Tone. I think one of the most important regulatory issues is the difference of custodial and non-custodial. The non-custodial aspect is what really keeps a lot of regulation at bay. Currently in the U.S., there's a distinction that anything that's called an unhosted wallet or anything that allows users to hold the Bitcoin with themselves and not with a central custodian doesn't require MSB registration with FinCEN and therefore doesn't require the collection of KYC or the blocking or freezing of assets if the government makes a statement that the company has to comply with some someone's giving misinformation, oh, your Bitcoin's frozen. Well, if it's non-custodial, at this stage anyway, they can't do that.
So I would agree with that. I would say right now, the most important issue for Bitcoiners is something called the third-party doctrine that relates to if you hold your Bitcoin on an exchange, you're essentially giving up your rights to online privacy and your Fourth Amendment rights in the Constitution. There's a bill that's been introduced by a congressman called the Keep Your Coins Act, and it came out from Congressman Warren Davidson. And what I will tell you about this bill and why it is so important is it is a battle now between self-custody and if you hold it on an exchange. And if you hold it in self-custody, what his bill would purport to do would be to protect peer-to-peer transactions in the United States, as well as protect you from the ability simply to hold your Bitcoin in self-custody. The US government right now sees this as one of the major risks, particularly with what happened in Canada and now what's happening in Ukraine. I just came from a webinar where we're hearing from Carol House of the White House, who basically gave the message that for sanctions to be enforced against Russia at this critical time in our history, it's going to require not just the cryptocurrency exchanges, but the individuals themselves, the cryptocurrency community. And what our responsibility is in regards to enforcing those sanctions, of which they want it to be at the maximum level to try to inflict pain on Putin.
Yeah, so let's stick with that angle since you brought up the whole situation with Russia and Ukraine. I recently read the statement that the Russian financial authorities are actually not interested in adopting Bitcoin the way El Salvador did. And I read the reasons. I mean, it came out in Russian. I can read it. And the reasons didn't make sense. But I understand why Russia doesn't want to go to Bitcoin, because they think they're powerful enough to maybe join China and others and build an actual fiat competitor. So by them announcing that, that actually, in a way, benefits Bitcoin, because what if they decide to do a full 180 and Russia just opens up Bitcoin the way El Salvador did? What kind of response do you think the US would have?
I think, yeah, that's a big risk. Or I was looking at it as a big risk earlier in the week as everything was developing, because they're already saying Bitcoin boils the oceans. Then they're saying Bitcoin is racist, and then now Bitcoin helps you evade all these sanctions. So. They can say what they want about it, though. It's too late. Bitcoin's already out there, and it's already in the hands of so many people, and it is decentralized that no matter what the narrative is, I don't think it can be stopped. In reality, they can put whatever narrative they want on it, but it's in the hands of the people. And I think it's going to come where they get all these CBDCs and try and really control people with those, digital asset. They have, full ability to, freeze, withdraw your taxes, whatever they want to do with these government-issued coins. But they're not Bitcoin, and people can still choose to opt out of that traditional system and kind of vote with their dollars of just disengaging with it.
I mean, the truth is, and I mean, they even talked about this morning, Bitcoin's not on the top of their list. I mean, there's this thing called cash. There's other ways that illicit funds are used, so it's not the primary concern. Obviously, I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about, Mr. Gary Gensler, who also has a lot of concerns relating to this industry too. But, what I guess I think is so critical about your question is how nation states now are adopting or not adopting Bitcoin is it couldn't be at a higher point right now after El Salvador, after we saw Canada do to its own citizens, and now what Russia and Ukraine are trying to do, both with Ukraine trying to raise money with Bitcoin. It just creates a huge new area that maybe we all should have expected, right? Because we knew Bitcoin was going to change the world. It's just happening now where nation states actually have to consider it.
Yeah, so one quick thing, since you mentioned El Salvador and that bill by the senator to keep your coins. I recently saw a bill titled El Salvador. So someone is trying to create a bill. I don't know if you know much about it, but it just seems crazy to me how I don't think any single senator would have been able to pick out El Salvador on a map a year ago. And now there are bills in the Senate titled El Salvador. I don't know if you're familiar with that. If you've seen it, you can comment. Otherwise, we're going to talk about Gary Gensler.
I haven't seen that bill, but I love what El Salvador is doing. And I was just having a conversation before this. The whole criticism to El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin, a lot of people were saying, oh, it's a must, like it's not a voluntary thing, that they're forcing everyone to use Bitcoin. But apparently the translation of that, it was a should, not a must. So just a random fact.
Yeah, it's not true. I mean, I've been to El Salvador. You walk up to a shop and you ask them if they take Bitcoin. If they say no, you're not going to start yelling at them. Not everyone there accepts it, but eventually they will.
Well, you'd appreciate this, Tone. The bill's acronym is actually ACES, since we just had the poker tournament last night.
Nice.
And it stands for Addressing Cryptocurrency in El Salvador, or the ACES Act. It was introduced by 3 senators, and it's looking at how the adoption of Bitcoin by El Salvador might not only affect them economically, but also might affect whether they're able to continue with their democracy. I mean, it's pretty amazing the scope at which they feel like the idea that a country has adopted Bitcoin as legal tender may mean the ultimate demise of that country.
Yeah, well, we're all keeping an eye on El Salvador, and so many people are going down there, and eventually moving down there is going to be great. All right, so let's change gears and talk about the security side of Bitcoin regulation. So Gary Gensler taking the head of the SEC job, I thought was very interesting, because after he left CFTC and went to teach at MIT, he was basically taught in this course, explained why Ethereum is an unlicensed and registered security, or at the very least launched as one. And I know he thinks that it still is, along with everything other than Bitcoin. What is he doing about it? And I'm sure he didn't want to be handed the Ripple mess because it's not going very well. So let's just talk about the security side of it. and then we'll move into the ETF side.
Sure, yeah, well, some really interesting developments on the security side last week with the BlockFi. Now any interest-bearing account, they've put out an investor bulletin that's a security. So, everyone should be on notice for those. And even more interesting, I think, was the regulation ATS proposal. So it was a 634-page proposal. They gave 30 days for comments on it. It didn't mention crypto once, but it had a definition of a communication protocol system that they changed or broadened the definition. And as they were discussing it, they said, we're making this so broad that it's going to keep up with expanding technology. And it certainly captures the DeFi markets. And it says, that basically the words that they changed was anyone that uses, now it's anyone that makes available as what they deem a security. And then they changed it so that it would be not only, it was market participants, now it's buyers and sellers, and it doesn't and they removed the word multiple buyers and sellers. So it's just this very broad definition that would encapture anything that's offering a quote and anyone that's receiving it, but it does have a non-discretionary component. So if it didn't have that non-discretionary component, anyone that went to sell an NFT on Telegram in a private chat would probably be breaking this rule and should be registered as an alternative trading system. But because there's the non-discretionary component, the ability to accept the order has to be available, like without choosing whether you're going to accept or not. But what that does is I think it's trying to capture the whole decentralized finance market and force it to comply with, have an ATS. And ATSs only offer trading in the normal trading hours, and it requires that everyone's KYC'd and registered. Oh, and there's David Silver. But yeah, I think that Reg ATS is a pretty broad thing, and maybe there's some arguments there that it's impacting speech. Like we have NFTs, they're often depicting political speech. Like we even see Ukraine's doing their airdrop of NFTs. So so far I think the NFT market has kind of gotten away from the securities oversight because they're art and they're considered just like the same regulation as tangible art. But now if this regulation ATS thing comes in, anything that's considered a security would have to be sold, pursuant to all these registrations. But
yeah, I think the regulation ATS was a bit of a foot fault by Gary Gensler, as I think the bottom line is it was very cryptic in the way it came out, which we can all understand. It wasn't quite explicit enough to say this could impact the cryptocurrency markets, even though it does. And there's something called the APA, or the Administrative Procedures Act, that some are even now saying that he might be in violation of because of the way in which he introduced the order and then only gave 30 days. What I think is great about what Gary Gensler has done in his role is to say Bitcoin is real. It really exists. And that was one of the first things that he said out of the gate. He basically provided the community the assurance that essentially Bitcoin is treated as a commodity by the CFTC. When I was at the FDIC during the financial crisis, you saw all this fighting between the FDIC's turf, the Federal Reserve's turf, and even as we're trying to save the country from financial collapse, everyone's like, well, how are we going to come out ahead on this, as an agency? And so what you're going to see is you're going to see Gary Gensler at the SEC and the CFTC have this fight over what's a commodity, what's a security. It's going to be a challenge. I will say that he earns 5 stars for going after what he believes are securities, and to a lot of people in the White House administration at this point, almost to his detriment, because they feel like he's just a one-trick pony. That's all he talks about is crypto, what are securities? But you know what? He's trying to enforce the law as it is. He believes it's very clear, and even though he's going to have pushback and have other distractions along with it, overall, he's done this industry a great service by clarifying as a base understanding that Bitcoin is here and it's here to stay, and that is not something that's I think we're ever going to see as a commodity. I mean, as a security. Sorry.
All right, let's welcome David Silver to the stage and the topic.
So, I apologize profusely. I was upstairs, and you guys can't tell. I literally just sweat through an entire outfit. I literally was on the phone with a federal court judge. My name is David Silver. I'm a lawyer at Silver Miller. I am the guy who sues everyone in crypto. I've done it for years. I've been doing it since 2014. But most importantly, I was just on a call where we just took one of the largest exchanges in the US. We took them to trial. We kicked their asses, and we're arguing over fees right now so I can buy a new home in Vail. Because that's what I want to do, because they are treating people like shit right now. The big exchanges, they are not your friends. And people here, I know most of you, this is, I think, my 4th year doing your conference.
Third. Well,
Third?
we skipped a year.
We skipped a year, I'm sorry.
COVID, yeah.
It's
It's been 4 years, but it's this conference 3, yeah.
And what I've learned at this conference from you guys so much is that people who want to be truly in crypto don't keep their money on exchanges. So I don't want to represent any one of you. You guys do it better. And doing it better is so important for yourselves. And that's what I've learned at Unconfiscatable in 3 out of the last 4 years.
Was it Coinbase?
I'm not allowed to say who it was, but they may be located in California.
All right. So what's your view on what Gary Gensler has been up to in terms of securities? And the prior topic was the whole sanction topic and Bitcoin being front and center. So feel free to throw your thoughts in there.
I think it's really interesting. People thought Gensler was going to be more pro-crypto because of his background and what he was teaching at MIT. They thought he was going to be better for the space. Personally, and this is one thing, Tone didn't really like me when we first met. He thought I was like the devil child. He's kind of come around more to my way of thinking, unfortunately. But he'll disagree heavily with what I'm about to say next. I truly believe regulation is good for the space. I truly believe in KYC, AML, regulatory clarity. I am a conservative person. I believe in all of those things. I think Gensler is going to bring in the next, well, I don't know who's going to win the next election, but for the next 3 years, he's going to bring more of a banking system to crypto. And that means that you don't control your crypto as much unless you have your own keys and your own coins. So from that perspective, I think Gensler is going to bring, through the SEC, through more actions. I mean, we used to sit here and talk about Tezos and how we thought the SEC was going to go after Tezos. It's still one of the most shocking things to me that they did not go after Tezos. Because at the end of the day, that was an unregistered sale of a security. So from my perspective, I think we're going to see Gensler go, he's going to go after more of these companies. He's going to bring in regulation. He's going to bring in the ability of the government to sanction people through the mechanisms, exchanges and whatnot. So he's going to try and force Bitcoin to become more like banking.
But do you think he'll try to do that with, say, self-custody of coins? And how would he be able to pull that off?
You guys are all a lot smarter than me. I can't figure out how he can do that with self-custody. But in order for Bitcoin to go from 40,000 to 100,000 to 1 million, I don't really believe that's going to happen, but I've been wrong the whole time. I've had my Bitcoin since 2012. I thought it was worth $1. But in order for it to go that high, it basically has to go through a custody process. If everyone holds their own coins, then we're never going to hit those numbers. So I think from the government's perspective, they're looking more at Main Street money and Main Street money coming in, and they'll be able to control those access points.
All right, we're going to find out. You guys have any comments on that?
Well, I would just slightly disagree as to the KYC point. I just mentioned earlier on the panel about a bill from Congressman Warren Davidson. It's called Keep Your Coins Act. And if you notice, the acronym in that is the KYC Act. And so that's poking fun a little bit at the idea of KYC, because I personally believe that we should be able to exist in a country where we can do peer-to-peer transfer of Bitcoin and use the Lightning Network to do transactions with each other without having it be assumed that we're somehow committing a crime or obfuscating transactions. And
David didn't get applause.
It's better than getting booed off the stage is what usually happens.
yeah, and I don't mean that. I understand, David, exactly what your point is on this and as far as the market and acceptance. But I think that at some point or another as a society, we have to decide, we live in the rule of law, as you know, as an attorney, where we're giving up that concept of if we have our coins on an exchange, there's the third-party doctrine. And of course, with the third-party doctrine, that means you're forfeiting your rights about online privacy. That means that you're forfeiting your rights to property and your ability to protect yourself with the Fourth Amendment. And so, are you allowed to have gold in your garage? Yes, you should be able to. Do you have to register that gold with the US government? Not today. I don't think the same should apply for Bitcoin.
Yeah. Very well said. And then there's the other risk, like with the self-custody issue. You know, we've seen just all these countries working in conjunction together. Like as soon as the U.S. put the sanctions on Russia, you know, Canada, Europe, the UK, Japan, Australia, they all followed. And the sanctions also include, you know, if you're spouting misinformation, and that's where I think the real danger is, because as soon as someone's, you know, who's determining what's information or misinformation? It's, you know, a centralized, you know, giant global government, and if they come down, you know, any harder, then Bitcoin right now, or digital assets that are, well, right now only Bitcoin, because I think we saw, you know, Infura, the node host for Ethereum, MetaMask, everyone that was in Venezuela and Iran, and also the OpenSea people that were on Iran, they just lost all their assets. So, you know, the whole reason, I think, of Bitcoin or this conference, you know, the unconfiscatable feature, it goes away if we just move everything onto an exchange and it's all KYC'd.
Can anyone talk more about that? I haven't been keeping up with that whole MetaMask thing. Like, what really happened? I don't know how curious people are, but like shitcoiners learning what it's like to shitcoin is usually an interesting topic to me. Can you a little more information on that?
Yeah, so OpenSea, they just updated their terms of service to say, you know, anyone that's using our service, they're going to basically block the jurisdictions that are sanctioned on the OFAC regions. But they added Iran. But then I don't know if they actually froze the assets and gave them to OFAC, or they're just keeping the assets, but the owners of the assets, you know, it's gone. And Infura is the node host for MetaMask, and you have the option on MetaMask to select to host your own node or to use alternative nodes, but the default is Infura. And I think Infura updated it for Venezuela, like they came out and apologized, but it just shows what a centralized system Ethereum is. If, you know, all of a sudden every Ethereum on MetaMask using this Infura that's going to comply with whatever the OFAC tells them, you know, it's not decentralized.
So OpenSea actually is a disaster right now. And actually, they changed their terms of service because of me. We have had so many lawsuit threats with them in the last month for all of the hacking and everything that's going on. I assume most people know that OpenSea is having a floodgate of problems, and they actually screwed me. I'm a contingency fee lawyer. They actually paid everybody off. It goes to show you how much money they're making because their terms of service weren't actually written very well. And now they actually are they've gone like every other major exchange that's worth $1 billion, but they paid everybody off that got stuff stolen. That goes to show you how much money is there. And they are, you know, I say this about Coinbase. When Coinbase started, they were a mess. But they are now a legitimate business doing things. OpenSea is moving in that direction as well, which goes back to our earlier conversation. They're a third party, they are what they are. And I mean, their best arguments to me, their lawyers actually wrote a letter that said, NFTs aren't real. They're like, you don't own any IP property, you don't own anything. And then they paid everyone off because that would have been a terrible position.
Is that letter public?
No, that would be a terrible position to put their clientele in. Because the argument was, well, you don't own any intellectual rights to the work. And they came around, let's just say that.
You know, one thing about this with Infura and MetaMask as background is just a couple days ago, a lawsuit came out from the minority shareholders against Consensus, which is Joe Lubin's company out of Brooklyn. And in those papers, it was revealed that Infura and MetaMask are partially, if not wholly owned by JP Morgan Chase. If you remember back in 2020, there was a transaction where forgetting the Ethereum concept that's internal to the bank that was sold out, essentially. They sold out their Onyx system that was for privacy from JP Morgan Chase. For me, I can't remember the name. But the point is, though, that MetaMask and Infura, it was shown just a couple days ago via this lawsuit that's in Switzerland that JP Morgan Chase is potentially responsible for the nodes of Infura and MetaMask. So please raise your hand if you think Jamie Dimon is going to protect Bitcoin. Okay? So that's really the level of, as you say, you know, shitcoinery that we've reached, is that we have one of the largest ecosystems that, you know, whether it's a security or not, sanctions trumps, that's what Gary Gensler's issue is. He's fighting really hard about the securities thing, but sanctions trump all that. And the minute you get sanctions involved, that's typically the priority.
All right. So there was a settlement with BlockFi recently, I think.
$100 million BlockFi.
Yeah.
Again, another company that has so much money they can afford to pay $100 million. But they have the most false and misleading advertising, because people who give money to BlockFi, it's like, oh, you'll get 6%. You only get it on like the first half of a Bitcoin, and after that, it's like 0.01. But it's worse than actually a savings account. But that's just my opinion. You guys can jump in on BlockFi. I like suing them also, just to be clear. They have terrible security.
Well, one of the interesting things on that is they're told they have to register as an investment company within the next 60 days. But the Investment Company Act is only for securities, and I guess now they've said that, I thought originally that they were getting in trouble for their lending. So it was like, and Commissioner Hester Peirce came out as well with a statement saying it's actually impossible for them to register as an investment company because of the product that they're using it's a note. And with the note, they don't use the Howey test, they use the Rev's family resemblance test for promissory notes. So it's a different, they're both securities, but under different, avenues to become a security. And but then after that, the Investor Bulletin came out stating that the interest-bearing accounts are actually securities; they're not notes. But and 32 states were involved in that as well. So it wasn't just the SEC that went after BlockFi, but now you have 32 states and their blue sky rules stating that these are securities as well. So everyone doing investment-bearing, assets in crypto really is on notice now that they all have to somehow get registered as an investment company, which requires SEC approval, which is probably years and years away from approval. So it's like you just go away and don't operate is what they told them.
Yeah, I think that this is part of Gary Gensler's strategy, right, which is to try to bring in large companies like BlockFi and through regulation by enforcement, explain what's supposed to happen to the industry. I'm sure there's other exchanges on his list like Coinbase and others that he's trying to work on with interest-bearing products. And so it's really an effective maneuver by him from a regulatory standpoint. And it's not like a secret. I mean, Gary Gensler said like 50,000 times to please come in and talk to me about registering your exchange. And I'd be curious to hear what you think, David, in terms of the idea of, what Gary Gensler is saying is if you have 50 tokens on your exchange, if just one of them is a security, that means you're supposed to have registered with him at the SEC. And I have a feeling of the 50 tokens on any exchange, there's likely some securities that can be found, which would work well for what Gensler's trying to do.
I personally believe that the large exchanges should all be registered. My personal problem is having sued, I think at this point, Coinbase, Kraken, Bittrex. I have not sued Gemini, so they're the only ones who I can't say this about. Is price execution. In every one of our lawsuits, they all say the same thing. We are not a real exchange, and price execution is based on our system and our platform only. Most of the lawsuits I did a couple of years ago were about flash crashes, and we use as evidence. Well, Kraken had a flash crash. Bitcoin went from 1,000 to $1, and you should turn around now. And Coinbase, it never dropped under 1,000. And their response is, well, because we're not real, and it's our platform, and we can do what we want. But every exchange says that, and I think that as we've become this industry that is rapidly approaching the trillions of dollars, and the belief that Bitcoin is worth one price universally. The reason why Gensler is going to go, and why all of these exchanges are going to eventually look like true trading platforms, is price execution. Because you should not be there. Arbitrage should not be a thing in Bitcoin. Arbitrage in the US, arbitrage overseas. The people I actually know who made the most money in Bitcoin were in 2014, who were simply arbitraging overseas. I mean, you can have a 25% differential, and that was 100% safe, easy money to make. Now, that shouldn't be a thing, so I do think that they're going to find a reason to make sure everyone registers as a trading platform.
All right, let's change gears one more time on a topic that almost endangered the name of this conference, Unconfiscatable, with the announcement by the federal government that they have confiscated like $3.6 billion worth of Bitcoin, Ethereum mostly, from two people who I can't possibly see hacking Bitfinex. You guys are probably a little more involved with the details of this. I think, David, let's just start with you and go that way. How insane is that story? What's really going on?
So my daughter right now doesn't think I'm a real lawyer. She thinks I'm just a TV personality. I literally had to get my hair cut. I just shot a piece for the NBC Nightly News yesterday, I guess 2 days ago now, talking about this. Because this story is fascinating. Because, first of all, and I've been quoted all over the place, I accidentally referred to these two people as patsies. They are patsies. I mean, I can't even think of a better word. They're not the hackers. They're not accused of being the hackers. But the person who hacked gave them the money because they realized Bitcoin's unconfiscatable. They knew they couldn't keep it themselves, so they gave it to two patsies. I mean, this woman's videos are some of the most entertaining shit I have ever seen in my life. I literally spent 2 days just watching her rap, and I couldn't stop laughing. But she proved the point. Bitcoin's unconfiscatable. The person who hacked, and by the way, I think the government knows who the hacker is, just so we're clear. I think the government 100% knows it's this is my belief. Cameras everywhere. I get sued all the time nowadays for putting my foot in my mouth. This is David Silver's personal opinion that the government already knows. They know who the hacker is. I believe probably it was an insider or someone working with an insider. But ultimately, those people were smart enough to know, because it's unconfiscatable, because tracing mechanisms nowadays, we can trace through mixers, we can trace through dark pools, we can trace through everything. So there's no more like, ooh, it went through a mixer, this is easily to get rid of. No, they at 100% are setting this up to actually make the argument it's unconfiscatable. Yeah, they brought this in because the people who stole it didn't want it because they knew they could never move it around without getting caught. So I think it actually proves the point that Bitcoin's unconfiscatable. And I do think that the best thing that came out of this is that ultimately, well, I got more airtime on TV, which I really like. And two, I do think that this is proving the point of why crypto is special, why Bitcoin is special, because the government, if you want to move it in the right way, criminals now are recognizing they don't want to be holding stolen Bitcoin anymore because it is unconfiscatable. So you give it to a patsy, and the two patsies are going to go to jail for a while.
Back in the 80s, there was this issue of how the U.S. Treasury would confiscate your cash if they found cocaine on it. And, the government authorities eventually got over that, where there's, traces of cocaine on all cash. And I think you're now seeing a similar life cycle with Bitcoin, with the Bitcoins that are clean and the Bitcoins that aren't. And I think when you see these two people, I think Patsy's is exactly right, but it's a policy that's trying to create something that is a message. And the message, I think, is with the Department of Justice is creating their National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, with the FBI creating its own unit, with the Secret Service even creating some videos as they're explaining that the highest levels of intelligence will hold anyone responsible in this ecosystem if you're caught with Bitcoin, whether it's traced from an illicit activity. Obviously, in cyberspace, there isn't cocaine yet, although I haven't checked the metaverse. Yeah.
Yeah, also, this somehow turned up. With that hack and then other hacks, you see the ransomware attacks where the FBI has said that they found those people and confiscated that Bitcoin too. It's it just shows it's really hard to move this stuff around. And even on the ATM network now, it's like those machines all have to take a photo of the person as they withdraw it and comply with like currency transaction reports or suspicious activity reports. So it really, the ecosystem has changed a lot from the days when you could just go online and make big sales. It's all, a lot of it's captured, as said, and I think the FBI has really sophisticated ways to try and find people like hack in or create alternatives to your laptops. Like they've got really sophisticated ways to get into wallets. So security is difficult.
So I talk about this all the time. I've talked about this at this conference. I right now have a federal court judgment for 11,000 Bitcoin from the original Cripsy case. I don't know, as this conference has grown, people used to know what Cripsy was. We got one in the back.
All right, who remembers?
There we go. It's all about Big Vern. And it was like the first case I did. So I have a court order for 11,000 Bitcoin. They've been sitting in the same wallet, the same 5 wallet addresses for the last, I don't know, I guess 8 years now. And if they were confiscatable, trust me, we would have gone after them. I mean, it's just there's nothing that can be done. And the reason why Big Vern doesn't move them, one, he's publicly indicted now. I used to have to say he was under super secret probation, but they released the indictment. He's still living in China. He's been weak. We are tracing him moving some of the smaller amounts of Bitcoin, but he hasn't touched the large ones yet because that's like radioactive. So it's good, but the criminals are learning that stolen Bitcoin is worthless because no one will touch it because of the FBI, DOJ, Secret Service. They're all using Chainalysis. They're all using live tracing from CoinFirm now. They're all using Elliptic has its own. All 3 of the major forensics firms. It's easy as can be, and the price of tracing it has gone from a $100,000 case at Chainalysis 5 years ago is like $150 now. I mean, it's like the cost of a TV. It just keeps getting lower and lower. So I think that's good for the space. I think it's healthy that you now know that you're transacting in legitimate crypto.
All right, we're going to do a question. We have time for one question. I'm going to disagree with David Silver on this. And Doug, come up here. There's a microphone stand. I'll come down. So I am going to agree on this one and disagree on this one. Sorry. And hold on. Because privacy functionality is going to get built out. It wasn't the most critical functionality. Scaling was more important than privacy. But privacy and fungibility are coming. So I think if Big Vern holds out another 5 years or so, I think he will be able to move that. Doug?
Yeah, so similar question then. So the question is, does Lightning fix this? Guy Swan just did a presentation about how when you stick something in a Lightning network, the different nodes don't know where it's going, where it came from, how many hops. Is this an irrelevant understanding that the government will soon say, oh shit, now we gotta figure this one out?
I think those amounts are really big for the Lightning Network. Maybe that one will take 10 years, but I don't know. I don't know what David Silver's thoughts are.
U.S. government is reactive, not proactive. So they will have that moment when they say, oh, shit, we missed this again, and have to start from scratch.
I think the best way to clean tainted coins lately has been the U.S. government taking it and reselling it, and it's the only way those coins can get back into circulation clean.
Wait, so what's going to happen to that 3.6 billion? Shouldn't Bitfinex get it back?
So this is a really great question because Bitfinex, who has some of the best lawyers in the country, they're claiming that they've already paid off their investors who lost money with their token. So they are making this claim for all $3.6 billion. I will bet both of my children's lives that will not happen. The government is never going to hand them $3.6 billion. They're going to tax the hell out of this. They've already announced they're doing the restitution program. All of their clients, and now most of them are international. I've been speaking to a lot of them. Their attitude is this: well, I got the token that was worth 10%. I am a claim holder. I'm a stakeholder. I want my money back. Now, the problem is most of these people haven't paid taxes and they haven't actually reported any of this stuff. So we're back into that whole privacy thing again. But it is going to be, the government is not turning that money over. They might sell it. That's an option.
Right, that's the other billion-dollar question. Is the government going to keep the Bitcoin or are they going to sell it?
So they're claiming right now they're going to do a restitution program. This hasn't been finalized yet. What they're temporarily telling the clientele is that they're going to do a restitution program with a price fix from back then. And as you can imagine, wealthy crypto holders do not want to take a price fix from 5 years ago.
Well, that's certainly another way to have your coins clean, right? Is maybe we should start going to U.S. Marshals auctions and buying Bitcoin from the U.S. government, because how can you go wrong there?
All right, guys. All right, this was a great panel. Thank you so much.